All right, we're not here for a long time, we're here for a good time, so let's get into it. Today we're going to talk about the infamous, the famous, my favorite delay, the Boss DM2. Okay, when it comes to analog delay, the Boss DM2 is kind of one of those legendary pedals that came out, and I don't think we realize how revolutionary it was at the time to come in such a small case, right? In the 70s, you had the Deluxe Memory Man, you had some other pedals, even Boss or Roland at the time made the DM1, which was a much bigger pedal. But then in 1981, they put a delay in what we know as a normal Boss enclosure. Now at the time, that wasn't something that happened, right? So it was really revolutionary at the time. I'm gonna show you why this is my favorite analog delay, and I'm actually gonna kind of compare it to my DD3 so you can hear the difference between digital and analog. Okay, so before we get into this, let's talk about some of the quirks of a vintage Boss pedal. Back in the early 80s, Boss used a power supply known as an ACA. Now all that means is Boss gave you an adapter that put 12 volts into the pedal. Now don't think, oh, I need to go get a 12 volt, that'll give me more headroom, blah, 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 because there's actually a diode and a resistor on the inside that reduced that to 9 volts. So you have a couple of choices, because if you're like me, all of my new fancy power supplies don't run on 12 volts. Most of them run on 9. You can get some that switch to 12, but I don't have that right now. So you have two choices. You can go inside and modify the pedal by removing the resistor and the diode and putting in jumpers, and then it'll run off of a 9 volt like you're used to. Or they also had a system with this where if you daisy chained it, so if you daisy chain it, in other words, you connect a power supply to this delay and you have a Y that goes to another one, if you daisy chain it and also connect them together with a patch cable, it will run off of 9 volts, which is what I'm going to do today. Not really going to bother modifying this pedal. It's got sentimental value and I don't want to do that. So I'll show you how to daisy chain it and what you do when we do the comparison here in a minute. So a quick fun story about this particular pedal. So this one was built December 1983, and I actually got a call years ago from a buddy of mine that was at a pawn shop, and he found this thing and he's like, hey, you like guitar pedals, do you want this thing for 75 bucks? And I was like, yeah, give it to me. I mean, it's in fantastic shape. It came with the box and the instructions and all that's what's really neat. And also, I don't know if you can see this, someone etched into it the bottom numbers, which I'm guessing is from the pawn shop. So it's really cool. It's one of my favorite pedals. I toured all over Texas with it for years, and let's get in here and see what it sounds like. Okay, so before we start looking at all the things the DM2 does, let's talk about the difference between the DD3 and the DM2. Okay, so the classic question, analog or digital? So let's talk about analog limitations, quote unquote, versus digital. So the first thing you'll notice with a DM2 is you don't get a lot of delay time. So let's just crank these both up to their maximum repeat time, and then we'll look. So here's the DD2. That's as much delay time as you get. However, if I look at a DD3, I get this much. So that's the big difference, is delay time. The other difference is the quality of the repeat. So if I use my DM2, listen to just the quality of the repeat. So if I hit it, it kind of starts to fall apart and distort. And then if I try to do a similar delay time on the DD3, I get And so there you go. The two biggest differences, the amount of delay time that you can get with a DD3, with a digital delay in general, versus the amount of time you can get from an analog. And a lot of that has to do with just the way it processes the repeats. If you start to get into really long delay times, a lot of times with the analog delays, you start adding some noise and some other things that kind of happen. Modern ones are kind of a lot better at it. The Wazacraft one, which I think is an excellent version of the DM2, and if you're just looking to buy one and do the DM2 thing, go get you one of those. Don't spend the extra money on this vintage one. I've played both. They both sound close enough. So those quote-unquote limitations on an analog delay is actually what a lot of people like about them. They're a lot more warm, so but that's the thing, right? One man's warm is another person's muddy. All right, so let's talk about the DM2 and what makes it great. 3 knobs. How much more simple can you get, right? You have your repeat rate, which is the time between the delays, so the time between the slaps, so the time between the 2 tones. You have your echo, which is how loud the repeats will be, and then you have your intensity, which is how many repeats. Do you get one too many? And then remember, the nice thing about an analog delay like this is the more repeats you have, the more they start to deteriorate as they go. So a lot of times what I would tell somebody to do is just start here, point them at each other, point that up, get them all in there together, and you can already get a pretty good sound. So let's turn it off so you can get a chance to see. So see, you're already getting a great chicken picking sound. So that's what's great about it. You can just instantly get the sound of country and rockabilly. Now you could crank it up. I always liked to do this to kind of give me more of a, not sleepwalk, but so right, those are all great sounds. Now here's a fun thing you can do. Crank everything up and you'll get a weird oscillation like So there you go. So now one thing I will say, it's not a limitation, it's just something to think about. I feel like the more drive I push into the front end of this DM2, it doesn't handle it as well as a digital delay, but that's okay. You can still get really great rock and roll sound. So yeah, that's what makes this thing great. So there you go, analog or digital. Which one do you prefer? Me, I like the analog if I'm running clean and I'm trying to get kind of a warmer sound. Obviously, I'm not gonna get a whole lot of repeats out of this as we saw. And if you start really pushing the front of it with some gain, it can kind of get a little sloppy, which maybe that's what you want, but it's a classic. Now, I will say, if you just want an old 80s Boss delay pedal and you want to go spend $250, $300 on one, be my guest if you're collecting them. If it were me, I've tried the Boss DM2W, the new Wazacraft one. It sounds just as good. So save yourself some dough and go get one of those. Also, you'll get a longer delay time, so win-win. All right, there you go, guys. Thanks again, everybody. Hit the buttons to like and subscribe if you want. Comment. Tell me what your favorite delays are. I know everybody loves a deluxe memory man. I don't have one. I'd love to try one someday. So yeah, like, subscribe, tell me that. So tell me some other effects you'd like to see, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Later.